Hello, all, and welcome to Bennis Stories, a series of interviews with people who knew, loved, were influenced by, worked with, wrote with, were students and mentees of Warren Bennis. This is Kate Bennis, Warren's daughter. This series is created for the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute at the University of Cincinnati's Lindner College of Business. My partner in this endeavor is Betsy Myers. Betsy was a dear friend and colleague of Dad's, worked with him at the Center for Public Leadership at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government as its executive director. She has also been a senior advisor to both President Clinton and President Obama. Today, Betsy and I are delighted to welcome Rosabeth Moss Kanter. Rosabeth holds the Ernest L. Arbuckle Professorship at Harvard Business School, specializing in strategy, innovation, and leadership for change. Her strategic and practical insights guide leaders worldwide through teaching, writing, and direct consulting to major corporations, governments, and startup ventures. She co-founded the Harvard University-wide Advanced Leadership Initiative, guiding its planning from 2005 to its launch in 2008, and serving as founding chair and director from 2005 to 2018, as it became a growing international model for a new stage of higher education, preparing successful top leaders to apply their skills to national and global challenges. And we'll hear a lot more about this program in the interview. Author or co-author of 20 books, her latest book, published in January 2020, is Think Outside the Building: How Advanced Leaders Can Change the World One Smart Innovation at a Time. The former chief editor of Harvard Business Review, Professor Kanter has been repeatedly named to lists such as 50 Most Powerful Women in the World, per the Times of London, and she received the Thinkers 50 Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019. She has received 24 honorary degrees, doctoral degrees, as well as numerous leadership awards, lifetime achievement awards, and prizes, including the Warren Bennis Award from Linkage, I believe. And I also have known Rosabeth for many years because, lucky me, I got to travel with her family, but we'll hear more about that in the interview. So we are just delighted to welcome Rosabeth Moss Kanter. Welcome.
Rosabeth, it's so good to see you.
So you and Betsy know each other for how many years?
Since the Clinton administration.
Yeah. When I was running the Office for Women at the White House, you came for an event that I believe was the day Madeleine Albright's had just been named to be the first woman Secretary of State.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rosabeth. Thank you for taking the time. I would love to just start with how you knew Dad.
The first time I met Warren Bennis was when I was a really baby professor just moving to Boston. And I think he was just leaving Boston. And for some reason, we were connected, and I was over at his house on Beacon Hill, and we said hello, and I thought, oh, this is great. This could be a great friendship, but he left. He then went to Buffalo. So it was way back, and I really was a baby because I started my career very young because I didn't believe in staying in graduate school too long. I was at Brandeis. I was just coming to be an assistant professor. I was teaching sociology there, and one of my colleagues was Phil Slater, who was very close to Warren. That may have been why I got to meet Warren, I'm not sure. And of course, I have great admiration for the paper Phil did with Warren. Democracy is inevitable, and for a long time, I thought it was incredibly prescient that it told us about the world that was coming. I totally believed it. We are now in a little setback period, but I do believe that it isn't still inevitable in some ways, but we have to fix a bunch of problems because elites got too powerful and then too protective of their privilege. We should always raise questions about any state of the world because whatever it is, there's a counterforce somewhere that's ready to undercut whatever we think is inevitable. Skipping ahead a little and without having Warren in this per se, I did a book published in 1995 called World Class: Thriving Locally in the Global Economy about globalization. and what it was going to do, what it was doing to local economies, what cities needed to do to capture that force. And in Davos at the World Economic Forum that January 1996, I was asked to be one of the faculty to open the meeting as an educational session before the main meetings began. And that was a time when faculty were still important, before they had realized they could get every head of state, head of government, and CEO to come. And I said then, and it was quoted widely, that globalization is not something we should be celebrating too much yet, that global capitalism had won. I said, whoops, because someday we'll be having the headline, populism is back. And that got quoted a lot. So, yes, I believe that the forces that Phil and Warren talked about were really important, and that once people have choices because they have access to information, then they're much more likely to want to exercise choices, be autonomous, and that is a democracy building force. And it's one reason why one of the first things autocrats do is that they try to cancel the news and control it, and cancel higher education and control that.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm dying to hear your professional journey story, starting at Bryn Mawr, then at Brandeis.
When I was in college, I thought at first I was going to be an English major. I love literature, I love culture. That's something I have in common with Warren. I wanted to write, and I didn't know that a lot of these other fields existed. And I went for a transfer year, my junior year, to the University of Chicago. Junior year in the Midwest, not too glamorous, but I had loved everything about what Chicago stood for in terms of education. And it's just that it was cold and isolating. But it's there that I discovered the social sciences. And I discovered also that English was more quantitative at Chicago, but the social sciences were where you could study culture, society, the state of our world, which is something that I really wanted to do through literature. So I then came back to Bryn Mawr. I could have graduated at the end of the junior year, but I didn't want to. I went back, I changed my major, and then went to graduate school at Michigan in sociology, but also social psychology. And that was another connection with Warren's field because we knew many of the same people. I went ahead and got the PhD in sociology, not social psychology, because it was faster. So I did have this desire to get out of school and to be doing. I started out as an assistant professor at Brandeis. During that time, I had 2 years off. 1 year I was at Harvard at the Graduate School of Education teaching. Another year I was a fellow in law and social science at Harvard Law School. And I was exploring many professions. I then went to Yale, where I could have, if I wanted to, picked up a law degree while teaching. But then I decided I didn't really need a law degree because I had discovered management consulting. And that was a profession. What I wanted was to get out of the ivory tower and be on the ground, helping solve problems. To say a cliche, making the world a better place. And so I did that at Yale, what I could, and published a lot, and came back to Boston to teach at Harvard Business School, and I've been there ever since.
Oh my goodness, what an incredible journey. What was it about management consulting that made you excited? How did you feel like you could be of use there?
Well, it was a profession. You could use your expertise, and people would listen, and you could change institutions. And
Oh,
that was appealing to me. I didn't simply want to observe. I wanted to impact, and change was the thing I was interested in. And there were many variants of the kinds of things I jumped into. And even though At that point, I wasn't really much in touch with Warren. I certainly knew of the work he had done when he was at MIT, because that was a very important precursor to one kind of consulting that involved plan change. And that's really what I wanted to do, was have an impact.
Yeah. So it sounds like academia could be a little theoretical and you wanted to experience leading.
There were very few people like me. I was often the first or very close to the first woman doing what I was doing. And so boards and other things I picked and chose, sometimes not always making the right choices, as we all realize later, like which board, a company that went on to flourish versus one that went on to bankruptcy. I chose without knowing what the future was going to be like. But I didn't want to be an administrator particularly, although I was department head at Yale for a while and they wanted to make me chair for life. And that wasn't really how I wanted to spend my time. I had a colleague there. We were together. Just think about this, two people, 40% of the entire tenured women faculty at the entire university.
What?
There were two of us
Oh my gosh.
and only five total. And that colleague was Judy Roden. She went on to become provost at Yale, then president of the University of Pennsylvania, and president of the Rockefeller Foundation. And I still see her occasionally, and we still joke about that time at Yale. But she
Wow.
did want to be an administrator. I did not, because we then called it administrators, not leaders. I also
Aha.
chaired, I also chaired a university-wide planning committee, it was called, at Yale. And on that committee was an assistant professor, Henry Louis Gates Jr., Skip Gates. So I knew him from Yale. We both came to Harvard about the same time. And at Harvard Business School, I have had leadership responsibilities, but we don't really think of those as administering. We think of those as opportunities for vision and innovation.
Can you talk a little bit about the Leadership Institute at Harvard that you started, right?
Yes, I co-founded with two colleagues the Advanced Leadership Initiative at Harvard. We started talking about it around 2004, and we talked about it in Davos, and we talked to Larry Summers about it in Davos. So we had a solution to the crisis of so many people entering retirement age and living much longer than institutions had ever anticipated. And it was a great opportunity for Harvard. And our vision, the three of us, was that it would be university wide, interdisciplinary, because the problems were interdisciplinary. The question was how to unite all the professional schools around the topic of leadership, which they all wanted to teach. And I was really leading the three of us in our thinking, but we were very much co creating that we needed to do something of a different kind, not simply a leadership program that gets slotted into every school, but to add something that didn't exist before, that every school could benefit from and that could make a huge difference. And so we came up with the idea of advanced leadership. We shopped it around, we wrote about it, we did all the things you have to do to get an idea off the ground, build support. It took a while because we had a change of presidents during that time. And it took us a while to figure out exactly what to do. We had talked about research together, writing. I had gathered faculty members, most senior we could find who were interested and relevant from most of the other schools at Harvard. So it was three of us from Harvard Business School, but almost immediately we had David Gergen as our fourth. We had Howard Koh from the School of Public Health. We had Charles Ogletree from the law school, and we worked together as a team. Even though it was going to be university wide, we needed a home. And eventually we found the home. We still had to deal with a lot of skepticism. Is this educational tourism? How is it going to work? who owns it, how will it be governed? But at each obstacle, we came back with a good answer, partly because we had this incredible team of people who really believed in it. Fernando Reimers at the Ed School also joined us, and that was an impressive group of people. And one of the lessons was you start with the most senior. You can always add more junior people later, but you need that prestige. And we had to convince the central administration that it was theirs. It was not a business school program. And we did, and we pioneered a lot of things, both at Harvard and for the world. At Harvard, there was a lot of things that had to be learned about this kind of program and about who was coming to campus. Again, a little skepticism, some concerns, and the quality and caliber of our fellows won everybody over. And now people think it was everybody's platform helped ALI, and ALI has made a big contribution to the university, but also to the world. The kinds of projects the fellows have taken on, some of them are breathtaking and path breaking. I think for undergraduates, especially, I think it's important to be in touch with the world beyond the campus walls, the campus gates. I think that's important. How that happens, whether it's service projects and whether a small group then becomes social entrepreneurs, because I believe, and in my recent book, Think Outside the Building, I said that the two stages of life when people are most ready to take on big issues, big problems, and soldier their way through all the obstacles are fairly young, college age, and young, new in their careers, and late stage, successful in their careers. Because in between, you have family, you have the desire to rise in your career. And so the only two times when people are really free to say, I'd like to make a big difference. And I think that young people have an enormous amount to contribute. This is one reason why I spent so many years on the board of City Year. But the people who have experienced success in their careers bring a kind of wisdom and energy, especially if paired with the younger people. So we made a point of having our fellows interact with all the schools, and they could audit courses and they could sit side by side with undergraduates and graduate students and learn together, but also mentor them. And sometimes the mentoring went in both directions. So I believe that this intergenerational mingling is incredibly important.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things Warren used to say. He used to say that in order to grow, you had to have friends of all ages in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yes.
And these were successful people that wanted to engage with Harvard to make a difference in the world, to shift their concentration of their life to public service.
The fellows were all successful people. They had to be, or we didn't want them.
Yeah.
They had to be people with a track record of accomplishments. Often those accomplishments included having to mobilize other people, and they were ready to make a transition to from income earning years to their next years of service. In some cases, there was a lot of continuity between what they had done in their career and what they were going to do after their fellowship year. In other cases, it was totally different. And the continuity part, we had a fellow who had been president of a large grocery retailer who ended up deciding that he wanted to solve problems of hunger, but also nutrition. And then he added the environment because of what he learned at in his year at Harvard. And he started an inner city serving chain of stores that used food that would otherwise be wasted. So good for the environment. So it was a 3-for project, and he got a lot of publicity, a lot of credit, and we were very proud of his vision, which got larger because he was in the program. So people did not have to come with an idea, but we helped them enlarge their vision. Whatever their idea was, we would say bigger. Now, this is a very Warren Bennis thing. We would say, dream bigger. Don't stick with whatever you thought you could do in your neighborhood. Think of the world as your neighborhood, or think of yourself as enriching your neighborhood and you're a model for the world. So they love this idea of social impact. Toward the end of the first 4 years, we started uniting people, bringing people back. And so it really was a connection for life. And people bonded. That was surprising. They were so different. The one surprise I had was how quickly the fellows bonded, given all of their differences. But it's the hunger for connection and for a peer group that supports you in a new identity.
Love it.
That wonderful. Talk about leadership, Rosabeth. There you go. There you go. You led something wonderful with a great
Well,
team.
it was all a big pleasure.
Yeah.
I think I had to do all the things I did as foundations for what I'm doing now. I'm totally amazed that my friend and colleague, about to be former dean of Harvard College, Rakesh Khurana, is teaching a new course in the fall, and he says he's going to use my first book, Commitment and Community. I said, wow, I mean, that goes back a really long time. And so clearly I knew something then. I kept learning and I keep working at the edge of my knowledge. What happens as you advance in your career, and I'm sure this happened to Warren as he became senior official at universities, Cincinnati, etc., and then USC, that your life gets cluttered with too many things, too many opportunities. And I'm delighted to talk to you now.
Well, thank you for taking this time then, Rosabeth.
I'm delighted.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about now in terms of leadership and what the world needs?
I have been working a lot on on systems change. It was part of Think Outside the Building. It's what we teach the Advanced Leadership Fellows, how we build that in a lot more. And so I have a lot of cases. I'm thinking about what to write. I'm thinking about what to teach about it. But, how we fix the world. There is a big world out there, and a lot of it needs fixing. And who's going to do it? So this is the challenge for all of us to figure out what in small ways, what in large ways we can do to help move that further. In my case, and I think in Warren's case, thought leadership is a big way to do it. And even though at Harvard, the Advanced Leadership Initiative, I was a hands-on leader, but still, it was about multiplying thought leadership. It was about the fact that I couldn't get everywhere in the world and do everything, but I could get 40, 50 people at a time who would go out and do it. It was like building my own surrogates.
That's great.
And helping them to figure out that they, in fact, could do more. They could take on very big problems, and also that there were a lot of lessons from doing that. I also teach in a program that Harvard Business School does in US cross-sector groups from government, business, some entrepreneurs, faith communities, NGOs, sometimes the police, but they are learning about cross-sector coalitions because that's how we make change, not from our own discipline. We have to learn it and we have to be deep. This is where young people should actually go deep first and then start going broad. But then you have to know how to connect with people with a variety of perspectives, a variety of disciplines. So I'm building on all of that. And we teach this program every June.
What do you think is the most important aspect of leadership today?
There's no one important aspect. As with all things, it's like we joke, Rakesh just said this back to me the other day when I used to joke that there are 10 commandments, but people say, give me the top three. I mean, people want everything distilled. So
That's
our
so true.
program was a year. Could we do it in a week? The
Oh,
answer was no. And in fact, we wanted it to be 2 years, and that was a hard sell. But ultimately, people often stay for a second year.
oh, interesting.
You need more depth. So, for leaders today, the collaboration, of course, is incredibly important. We know it's important, but you also have to bring some expertise to the table. You have to bring something to the table. It's not just a group, understanding how to be a group. This is one place where I may have diverged from Warren's earlier roots with T groups,
Right.
groups learning to be a group. We're task oriented. You have to do something together that has impact, and you have to bring something to the table, your ideas, your expertise, not just your ability to facilitate and get on with people. So, substance is incredibly important. I would tell young leaders, learn a trade, learn substance, bring something to the table in a technical skill that you can share with other people, teach other people, that makes your value clear. And then network like crazy, inside and outside, because you get valued to the extent that you bring new resources to your group or your company. And then look for forms of impact via creating coalitions that together can get much more done. One of my favorite videos, TEDx talk, was the only three career steps that matter. Three I's: inclusion, influence, and impact. And inclusion means getting in the door. Influence, getting at the table. And impact, going outside the building. So, inclusion, you need all the credentials to get in, but that's not good enough to rise. I talk about all the reasons why and a lot of the things that are particular barriers for women. And then influence, you have to bring something extra to the group they don't already have. And then impact, you have to really look outside the norm, the way things are today, and begin to envision that it could be different.
I would love to touch on your famous book about confidence, how winning streaks and losing streaks begin and end, because I think that's really, really interesting and has had a long shelf life.
Confidence is a 21st century book. I mean, I don't want to go too last century. It's one of my favorites, but they're all, your babies. But confidence was the same thing. The same thing I always do. And by the way, Kate, earlier you said, well, I've had such a career of so many different things. I have done the same thing my entire career. I think, I talk to people, I learn something new, and I write about it. That's about what I've done. And it's the same thing. I work at the edge of my knowledge. Well, for confidence, it was coming out of a recession. I was interested in turnarounds, and I was interested in how to turn around nearly anything. When you were just at the bottom decline, how do you climb back up? Or institutions. So to teach, I did a lot of cases on companies in decline and how new leaders turned them around. And I looked at sports. So I've always loved sports without being particularly good at it. I can be good as a fan. And so I actually did a very robust study of sports teams. And I had these incredible research associates who were full time and some MBA students who chimed in. And we looked at professional and college sports teams with the longest losing and winning records in the previous period and studied what was different about them and then how did they turn around. And so all the keys, so I was still saying the same things I had said in all my other books in a different way. So I found typical dynamics of losing streaks, typical dynamics of winning streaks, including why winning streaks end in arrogance and complacency and change that wasn't embraced. And then I looked at how leaders, whether they were coaches or CEOs or Nelson Mandela, led turnarounds. And so all of that still holds. All of it is still being found again. And it was the idea of these cycles that nothing remains the same forever. And you think you're on a winning streak, watch out. I mean, because confidence, which became the title, was what leaders build in advance of victory. You build confidence in advance of victory. What confidence is, it's very simple. Confidence is simply the expectation of a positive outcome. That's it. However, you don't get the positive outcome just because you have confidence. You have to work at it. And what confidence does is give you the motivation to work on it because you believe it will pay off. And what happens on a losing streak is that people give up, they despair, and so they don't put in the work because they think it won't make any difference. And so my mission in life right now is to exude positivity. And a lot of Think Outside the Building starts with this idea of the lure of negativity and that we need the optimism of activism. One
Love
of
that.
my hashtag mantras, the optimism of activism, because just doing something, putting in the work, you often can turn it around and you feel better, you have more energy, and you can get things done. So, confidence laid the seeds of that. There have been other things that I have written even since then that are also, I'm most proud of is that they're robust and findings haven't been disproven. My book in 2015, Move, about U.S. infrastructure, what a weird thing for somebody interested in people and leadership to write about. But it all came down to leadership, whether we had big enough aspirations and visions and could mobilize the support to invest in the things that make our life better. And you could read that book today and say it's today, even though some of the statistics would change a little. And so we still need the will in America to invest in our future. And that's where we need the kind of confidence that comes from seeing that success is indeed possible. And the more we empower people to feel that way, to see that, the more we're likely to weather crises. And then we need people who take it one step further and say they want to take on the root cause of the problem and make a difference. So I'm constantly in all of my work playing back and forth. It's like Warren as an economist and a social psychologist. I'm playing back and forth between sociology, the systems, the structures, and the psychology, the social psychology. I also started at Michigan between structure and behavior toward situations and how they make people feel, and then how people choose to act, being able to change the situation. And so we have virtuous cycles, we have vicious cycles, and we have people who are doing their best to shift one to the other.
Rosabeth, that's so beautifully said and fascinating. What's the advice that you give for the kind of the feeling of onslaught to the whole inclusion and women and what we're seeing now?
I do have things that I say, and those 6 keys to success at change, whatever, that's on one of my TEDx talks, is really a lot of headlines that I'll say to people. So there's 6 keys, etc. But for sake of saying something original, this is a way I've been feeling recently. It's don't be a victim.
Yeah.
You know, and I got known for the concept of empowerment. That was one of the things that God attributed to me, and I'm proud of that. Although anything can be criticized, I had people on all sides of the political spectrum criticizing whatever. And at one point, someone said, well, what is our right to empower people? People empower themselves. We don't give them power. Well, you know what I mean. I mean, we have to encourage and support people. So don't be a victim, is one thing I'd say. My other thing about Warren, he was just such a lovely human being. And I felt very close to him as a friend, even though through all those years I practically never saw him. We were emailed sometimes. We would be side by side on the same program on a brochure. But in terms of actual minutes of contact, not that many, which just proves that relationships do need face to face. But if you have points of connection, you stay connected all those years. And I visited in California and saw him more when he was in Boston. But it was a really beautiful, wonderful relationship. And I'm proud that one of the awards, probably only one of the many awards I'm privileged and honored to have won, is called the Warren Bennis Award.
Oh, I didn't know that. And before we go, just one last question about you and Dad. So you were friends. He knew you very early on when you first came to Brandeis. So that would be the late 60s. And then he moved away. He went to Buffalo, that's right, in like 68. So you must have arrived in like 67 in Boston. And then throughout the years, do you feel like your ideas played off of each other's ideas at all?
It was different because he really was a pioneer, first of all, in the plan change and then in the humanizing of leadership. And I certainly connected with that. And where there were those points of connection and intersection, I believed he supported me. I could always get a book blurb. But I was also different because I really was interested in systems and structures
Yeah.
and substance. Now, he knew it about it. He was compared to the people who went on to be the so called gurus of leadership, not the initial ones who are often very educated. But there's an awful lot of pop psychology out there and people who write their book on this or that aspect of self improvement. He was different because he was a real intellectual and he knew people in power and he knew the substance and he knew the systems. He didn't write about it as much, although he wrote about leaders who represented it. I tended to write more about it too than he did. So we were different, but had these points of contact. And this institute, it has huge potential.
Hey, Rosabeth, before we go, can I just say one thing that really touched me today? I thought it's so genius what you said, that you work on the edge of your knowledge.
Yeah.
I think that's so fascinating about all the work you've done and all the contribution you've done. And I love that. I just love that statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosabeth. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful day.
We'll be
Bye.
in touch.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.